The stagecoach rattled into Los Alamos, New Mexico on a blistering afternoon in July 1876, carrying a young woman whose heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her bodice. And Olivia Ruth knew the moment she stepped off this coach, her entire life would change forever. She pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the dusty streets roll past, adobe buildings shimmering in the heat. 3 months ago, she had been in Philadelphia, reading an advertisement in the newspaper that promised a new life out west. A rancher named Ashton Edwards sought a wife, a woman of good character who did not mind hard work and isolation. The letter she had written in response had been the most honest thing she had ever penned, though she had saved one truth for last, revealing it only after they had exchanged 5 letters and he had sent money for her passage. She had a harelip, a cleft that ran from her upper lip to her nose on the left side, marking her as different from the day she was born. His response had arrived just before she boarded the train westward. The words were simple and direct, like all his correspondence. I asked for a woman of character, not perfection. Come to Los Alamos. I will be waiting. Those words had sustained her through the endless miles of travel, though doubt gnawed at her constantly. What if he took one look at her and changed his mind? What if the reality of her appearance was too much to bear, despite his written assurances? The coach lurched to a stop outside the depot, and Olivia smoothed down her traveling dress, a modest gray cotton that had seen better days. She wore a small hat with a half veil, something she had purchased specifically for this meeting, hoping it might soften the initial shock. The driver opened the door and helped her down, handing over her trunk and carpet bag with efficient courtesy. "Good luck to you, miss," he said kindly, tipping his hat before climbing back up to his perch. Olivia stood on the wooden sidewalk, clutching her carpet bag with both hands, scanning the street for a man she had never seen but whose words she had memorized. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat beginning to bead at her temples beneath the hat. Around her, Los Alamos bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys rode past on horseback, their spurs jingling. A group of Mexican women walked by with baskets of vegetables, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Somewhere a dog barked, and from the saloon across the street came the tinny sound of a piano. "Miss Ruth." She turned, and her breath caught in her throat. The man standing before her was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build evident even beneath his dusty work shirt and vest. His face was tanned dark from years under the New Mexico sun, weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw and high cheekbones. But it was his eyes that captured her, a striking blue-gray that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed composure. He held his hat in his hands, revealing dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. "Mr. Edwards?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended, and she hated the tremor in it. "Ashton, please." His voice was deep and warm, and when he smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkled. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." It was long, but manageable. She did not raise the veil, not yet. Her hands tightened on the carpet bag. He glanced at the veil, but his expression remained open and friendly. "Let me get your trunk. My wagon is just down the street. The ranch is about an hour's ride from town, but I thought you might want to stop at the hotel first, freshen up and rest before we head out. I have taken a room for you there so you can have tonight to settle yourself. We can talk about arrangements in the morning, if that suits you." His consideration touched her deeply. She had expected to be swept immediately to the ranch, perhaps married by a circuit preacher that very evening. This gave her time to breathe, to think, to gather her courage. "That is very thoughtful, thank you." He hoisted her trunk onto his shoulder with ease and gestured for her to follow. They walked down the street together, and Olivia was acutely aware of the people watching them, curious about the veiled stranger. Ashton seemed unbothered by the attention, nodding to people as they passed, occasionally exchanging a brief greeting. The hotel was a two-story adobe structure with a wide porch and colorful flowers in pots flanking the entrance. Inside, it was blessedly cooler, and the proprietor, a pleasant-faced woman in her 50s, greeted Ashton warmly. "This is Miss Ruth from Philadelphia," Ashton said. "She will be staying tonight, as we discussed." Of course. Welcome, dear. I am Mrs. Martinez. Let me show you to your room." The woman bustled forward with a key, leading them up the stairs to a clean, simple room with a bed, washstand, and window overlooking the street. Ashton set the trunk down and placed the carpet bag on the chair. "I will let you rest," he said, turning to Olivia. "There is a dining room downstairs. Supper is served at 6. Will you join me?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He lingered for just a moment, and she thought she saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face, the first crack in his calm demeanor. Then he settled his hat back on his head and left, his boots echoing down the hallway. Alone, Olivia sank onto the bed and removed her hat and veil with trembling hands. She caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the washstand and forced herself to look directly at her reflection, something she rarely did. The hairlip was prominent, pulling her upper lip into an uneven shape, exposing part of her teeth on one side, the cleft extending up toward her nostril. In Philadelphia, children had pointed and stared. Adults had averted their eyes or, worse, offered pitying looks. She had grown up knowing she would never marry, never have children, never lead a normal life. Her parents had died 2 years ago within months of each other, leaving her alone in the world with few prospects. The mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like divine intervention, a chance at something more than a lonely existence as a seamstress or companion to some wealthy woman. But now, faced with the reality of Ashton Edwards, a man far more handsome and kind than she had dared to imagine, her courage faltered. How could someone like him truly accept her? How could he look at her day after day without regret? She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face and hands, then changed into a fresh dress, a dark blue calico with white collar and cuffs. She braided her light brown hair and pinned it up neatly. When 6 o'clock came, she made her way downstairs, her stomach churning with anxiety. Ashton was already in the dining room, seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, and this time she wore no veil. She walked toward him, chin raised, forcing herself to meet his eyes as she approached. She watched carefully for the reaction, the inevitable moment when his expression would change, when he would realize what he had agreed to. He pulled out her chair, waiting until she was seated before returning to his own. A slight smile played at his lips. "I am glad you left the veil upstairs," he said quietly. "I want to know the woman I have been writing to all these weeks." His eyes traveled over her face, taking in every detail, and yes, she saw him register the hairlip, saw his gaze linger there for a moment. But there was no disgust, no horror, no pity, just calm acknowledgement, followed by something that looked almost like relief. "You are exactly as I imagined," he continued, "only prettier." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Mr. Edwards, you do not have to—" "Ashton," he corrected gently. "And I do not say things I do not mean, Miss Ruth. I learned early that honesty saves everyone a great deal of trouble." Mrs. Martinez appeared with plates of food, beef stew thick with vegetables, fresh bread, and cold lemonade. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the clatter of other diners filling the space between them. Olivia found she was ravenous, the stress of the day having burned through her breakfast. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally, needing to break the tension she felt coiling inside her. Ashton's face lit up, and she realized this was a subject dear to his heart. "It is not large, about 300 acres. I run cattle around 200 head at the moment. There is a good stream that runs through the property, so water is reliable even in dry years. The house is small, just 3 rooms, but solid. I built it myself 5 years ago when I bought the land. There is a barn, a chicken coop, a root cellar. It is a good life, Miss Ruth, but I will not lie to you. It is hard work and it can be lonely. The nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. Winter can be harsh and summer is unforgiving. But the land is beautiful and it is ours, free and clear. No debts. No one to answer to. It sounds wonderful, she said softly, and meant it. The idea of space, of land stretching out in all directions, called to something deep inside her. In Philadelphia, she had lived in a cramped boarding house, sharing a room with 2 other women, working long hours in dim light sewing garments for people she would never meet. I am not afraid of hard work. I know. Your letters told me that. He paused, turning his glass in his hands. I want to be clear about something, Miss Ruth. Olivia, if I may call you that. She nodded. Olivia. I sent for a wife because I want a partner, someone to build a life with. I am 32 years old, and I have spent the last 5 years working sunrise to sunset, falling into bed exhausted, waking up and doing it all again. It is a good life, but it is incomplete. I want someone to share it with. I want children someday if God wills it. I want to come home to someone who cares whether I have had a good day or a bad one. I want to care about someone else's days in return. His words painted a picture so achingly sweet that Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. But I need to know that you want the same things, he continued. Not just an escape from wherever you came from, but a real life here. Because if you are going to regret this, if you are going to wake up a year from now and wish you were back in Philadelphia, it is better we figure that out now. She set down her spoon and folded her hands in her lap, gathering her thoughts. I will not lie to you either, Ashton. After my parents died, I had no one. No siblings, no close family. I worked as a seamstress and I was good at it, but it was a living, not a life. People looked at me and saw only this. She gestured to her lip. They saw someone to pity or to avoid. When I read your advertisement, I thought perhaps in a place where no one knew me, I could be more than my face. And then you wrote back, even after I told you, and I thought maybe, just maybe, God had not forgotten about me after all. Her voice cracked on the last words, and she pressed her lips together, fighting for composure. Ashton reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. His palm was rough and warm, calloused from years of ranch work. He did not forget you. Neither did I from the moment I read your first letter. You wrote about wanting to see the sky go on forever, about craving silence after years of city noise. You wrote about wanting to grow vegetables and learn to ride a horse. You made me laugh when you described trying to imagine what a tumbleweed looked like. Those letters were the best part of my weeks. She looked up at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Truly, truly. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. So here is what I propose. You stay at the hotel tonight, think things over. Tomorrow I will take you out to the ranch so you can see it. You can stay a few days, get a feel for the place and the life. If after that you want to go through with the marriage, we will find the preacher. If you decide it is not for you, I will buy your ticket back to Philadelphia. No hard feelings. Fair. It was more than fair. It was generous and kind and exactly what she needed to hear. Fair, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. They finished their meal talking of lighter things. He told her about the town, pointing out through the window various establishments and their proprietors. She told him about her journey west, the changing landscape she had watched from the train window, the mix of excitement and terror she had felt with each passing mile. By the time they finished, the sun had set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple visible through the dining room windows. He walked her to the foot of the stairs, and they stood there in the dimly lit hallway, neither quite ready to part. "Thank you for coming all this way," he said. "I know it took courage." "Thank you for giving me a reason to be brave," she replied. He smiled, that same warm smile that crinkled his eyes, and tipped his hat to her before heading out into the night. Olivia climbed the stairs to her room, her mind spinning. She had expected so many things from this day, but not kindness, not genuine interest, not the feeling that maybe, impossibly, this could actually work. She lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the town settling for the evening. Dogs barking, horses nickering in a nearby stable, the distant sound of music from the saloon, voices speaking Spanish drifting up from the street. It was so different from Philadelphia, and yet she felt more at peace than she had in years. Morning came with bright sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of frying bacon wafting up from the dining room. Olivia dressed carefully in her most practical dress, a brown cotton with a full skirt suitable for riding. She packed her carpet bag with a few necessities, not knowing how long she would be at the ranch. Ashton was waiting downstairs, looking refreshed in clean clothes, his hat in his hands. They ate breakfast together, and she noticed how he seemed more relaxed today, some tension she had not fully registered yesterday now absent from his shoulders. "Ready to see your potential new home?" he asked as they finished. "Very ready." His wagon was loaded with supplies, sacks of flour and sugar, coffee, various tools and goods he had picked up in town. He helped her onto the seat, and she arranged her skirts as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. The two horses, a matched pair of sturdy bays, started forward at his command. They left Los Alamos behind, heading northeast along a well-worn road that quickly gave way to open country. Olivia stared in wonder at the landscape unfolding around them. The sky was enormous, a brilliant blue dome that seemed to stretch into infinity. Mesas rose in the distance, their flat tops stark against the horizon. The earth was red and gold, dotted with sage and pinyon trees. Mountains loomed to the east, their peaks still holding patches of snow despite the summer heat. "It is incredible," she breathed. Ashton glanced at her, and she saw pleasure in his expression at her reaction. "Wait until you see the ranch at sunset. The light turns everything gold and red, like the whole world is on fire in the best possible way." They talked as they traveled, and Olivia found conversation with him came easily. He told her about coming to New Mexico from Missouri, about working as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy his own land. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her father who had been a clerk and her mother who had taken in sewing. She told him about the surgery she had as a child, an attempt to repair the hairlip that had only partially succeeded, leaving her with the scar tissue and irregularity that marked her still. "Did it hurt terribly?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice, not morbid curiosity. "I do not remember much of it. I was very young, maybe 4 or 5. My mother said I cried for days after. They had hoped it would fix me completely, make me normal. When it did not, I think they grieved for what I would never have." What was that? A normal life, a husband, children, all the things mothers want for their daughters. He was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. "Seems to me you are on your way to having all those things now if you want them." The simple statement, delivered without drama or excessive emotion, settled something in her chest. "Yes," she said, "I suppose I am." The ranch came into view as they crested a rise, and Olivia sat forward, taking it all in. The house was small, as he had said, but well built, with thick adobe walls and a covered porch. It sat near a line of cottonwood trees that marked the path of a stream, their green leaves brilliant against the dry landscape. The barn was substantial, painted red, and she could see cattle dotting the hillsides beyond, grazing peacefully. A vegetable garden had been established near the house, though it looked like it needed tending. Chickens scratched in the yard. "Home," Ashton said, and there was pride in his voice. He helped her down and showed her around. The house was indeed small, but clean and well organized. There was a main room that served as kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace, a cast iron stove, a table and chairs, and a comfortable-looking chair by the hearth. One bedroom held a large bed, a dresser, and a wardrobe. The third room was clearly meant as a nursery or extra bedroom, currently empty except for some storage trunks. "I know it is not much," he said, standing in the main room, suddenly looking uncertain. "Not what you would be used to in the city. Ashton, it is perfect." She turned in a slow circle, imagining curtains on the windows, perhaps a rug on the floor, small touches that would make it truly a home. "It is more than I ever expected." His relief was visible. "Let me show you the rest." They spent the afternoon walking the property. He showed her the stream, clear and cold even in July, running over smooth stones. He introduced her to his horse, a big sorrel gelding named Red who nuzzled her palm looking for treats. The chickens were friendly, and she laughed when several followed them around the yard like small, feathered dogs. He explained his plans for the ranch, how he wanted to expand the herd gradually, maybe add some horses to breed and sell. "I could use help with the garden," he admitted as they stood looking at the weedy patch. "I am decent with cattle, but I cannot keep a tomato plant alive to save my life." "I can help with that," Olivia said. "My mother had a small garden behind our house. I loved working in it." As the afternoon wore on into evening, Ashton prepared supper, surprising her with his competence in the kitchen. "When you live alone, you learn to cook or you starve," he said with a grin, slicing potatoes into a skillet. She set the table and made biscuits from the supplies he had brought, and they ate together as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. True to his word, the sunset was spectacular. They sat on the porch after eating, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep crimson, the mountains silhouetted against the blazing colors. The air cooled quickly once the sun was down, a relief after the heat of the day. "What are you thinking?" Ashton asked quietly. Olivia considered the question. What was she thinking? That this place felt more like home after one day than Philadelphia had in years. That this man, virtually a stranger, somehow felt familiar and safe. That she was terrified and hopeful in equal measure. "I am thinking that I do not want to go back," she said honestly. "I am thinking that I want to stay here with you and see what kind of life we can build together." He turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face in the dimming light. "You are sure? I do not want you to feel rushed." "I am sure." And she was. It was perhaps foolish, perhaps reckless, but it was also right in a way she could not fully articulate. "Then we will ride into town tomorrow and find the preacher." He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I will do everything I can to make you happy, Olivia. I promise you that. I believe you." They sat like that as the stars began to appear, one by one, scattered across the darkening sky. Olivia had never seen so many stars, thick as sugar spilled on a dark cloth. Ashton pointed out constellations, and she tried to follow his finger, tracing patterns in the chaos of light. When it grew late, he insisted she take the bedroom while he made a bed for himself on the floor of the main room. She protested, but he was firm. "You are my guest tonight. Tomorrow, when we are married, it will be different. But tonight, you get the bed." She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere nearby. The horses moved in the barn. The stream gurgled softly. And beneath it all, the quiet sound of Ashton's breathing from the next room, steady and reassuring. She fell asleep with a smile on her face. Morning brought a flurry of activity. They both dressed in their best clothes, Olivia in the gray traveling dress she had arrived in, Ashton in a clean white shirt and black vest. They hitched the horses to the wagon and made the journey back to Los Alamos, arriving just before noon. The church was a small adobe building with a wooden cross above the door. The preacher, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner, agreed to marry them immediately. Mrs. Martinez and her husband stood as witnesses, beaming at the couple. The ceremony was brief and simple, traditional vows exchanged in the cool dimness of the sanctuary. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ashton kissed her forehead gently, a gesture of such tenderness that Olivia felt tears slip down her cheeks. They signed the marriage register, and Mrs. Martinez hugged them both, pressing a basket of food into their hands. "For your wedding supper," she insisted. The ride back to the ranch felt different now. Olivia was no longer a visitor, no longer testing the waters. This was her home. This man beside her was her husband, and the life stretching out before them was theirs to build together. That evening, after they had eaten the food Mrs. Martinez provided and the sun had once again painted the sky in brilliant colors, they stood together in the bedroom, and Olivia felt nervous for the first time all day. Ashton must have sensed it because he took her hands in his and looked down at her seriously. "We do not have to rush anything," he said quietly. "I know this is all very sudden. We can take our time getting to know each other." His consideration, his constant awareness of her comfort, made her love him a little bit in that moment. "I am your wife," she said softly. "I want to be your wife in every way." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. His gaze traveled over her features, and when he looked at her hairlip, she saw no hesitation, no reluctance. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle, and when they touched the uneven surface of her lip, he did not flinch or hurry past. Instead, he lingered there, kissing the scar tissue, the cleft, the imperfection she had hated her entire life. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. "This makes you you," he said, his voice rough. "I love it." Something inside Olivia broke open, years of shame and self-consciousness cracking apart under the weight of his acceptance. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him back fiercely, pouring into it all the gratitude and hope and dawning love she felt. He held her close, and in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a gentle exploration of each other. Ashton was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, checking in with her, making her feel cherished. When they finally lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arms around her, Olivia felt a peace she had never known. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me, really seeing me." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for coming all this way, for trusting me, for giving us a chance." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And when Olivia woke in the morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the warmth of her husband beside her, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Ashton taught her to ride, starting with an older mare named Daisy, who was patient with beginners. Olivia proved to be a quick learner, and soon she was riding out with him to check on the cattle, learning to spot problems, to read the landscape the way he did. She took over the garden with enthusiasm, weeding and watering, coaxing the vegetables back to health. She learned to milk the cow, to collect eggs, to churn butter. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done in Philadelphia, but it was satisfying in a way sewing had never been. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. She told him stories about the city, about the people she had known, the things she had seen. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his family, about the adventures and misadventures that had brought him to New Mexico. She learned that he had a sister back in Missouri, married with 3 children, and that his parents had died when he was in his early 20s. She learned that he loved to read but rarely had time for it, so she began reading aloud to him in the evenings, her voice carrying over the sounds of the desert night. Weeks turned into months. Summer's brutal heat gave way to the cooler temperatures of fall. Olivia had never seen autumn colors like those in New Mexico. The cottonwoods along the stream turning brilliant gold, the scrub oak on the hillsides blazing red. They rode out together on crisp mornings, their breath fogging in the air, to check on the cattle and move them to better grazing. In October, they made the trip to town for supplies and found the place buzzing with news. There had been some trouble with rustlers in the area, cattle disappearing from ranches to the south. Ashton listened to the talk with a serious expression, and on the way home, he was quieter than usual. "Are you worried?" Olivia asked. "A little," he admitted. "Rustlers can be dangerous. They do not take kindly to being caught. What can we do?" "Be vigilant. Keep the rifle loaded. Maybe I should teach you to shoot, just in case." The next day he did exactly that, setting up targets behind the barn and showing her how to hold the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger gently. She was not a natural shot, but she was determined, and after several sessions, she could at least hit what she was aiming at more often than not. "Let us hope you never have to use that for anything more than varmints," Ashton said, but there was approval in his eyes at her determination. The trouble, when it came, arrived on a cold November morning. Ashton had ridden out early to check on the herd, and Olivia was in the garden, harvesting the last of the squash before the first hard freeze. She heard the gunshot echo across the valley and froze, her heart suddenly pounding. A second shot followed, then a third. She dropped the squash and ran for the house, grabbing the rifle from above the door where they kept it. She was halfway to the barn to saddle Daisy when she saw riders coming fast down the trail. Her breath caught in her throat, but then she recognized Red's distinctive gait and Ashton's form in the saddle. He was riding hard, and there were 2 other riders with him, pushing cattle ahead of them. As they got closer, she realized one of the riders was not with Ashton, but chasing him. Her hands tightened on the rifle. The second rider she recognized as their neighbor, John Fletcher, from the ranch 4 miles south. The stranger fired again, and Olivia saw dust kick up near Red's hooves. Without thinking, she raised the rifle, sighted as Ashton had taught her, and fired. She was not trying to hit the man, just scare him, and it worked. The rider pulled up short, looking around to see where the shot had come from. That gave Ashton and John time to reach the yard. Both men wheeled their horses, pulling their own rifles, and the stranger seemed to reconsider his odds. He turned and galloped away, disappearing over the rise. Ashton was off his horse in an instant, running to Olivia. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. Are you?" She was shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system. "Fine. Thanks to you and that well-timed shot." He pulled her close, rifle and all, kissing the top of her head. "That is my girl." John Fletcher dismounted more slowly, grinning. "Madam, that was some fine shooting. You scared the hell out of him." "What happened?" Olivia asked, still trying to process everything. "Found them trying to cut out some of my cattle," Ashton explained. "There were 3 of them." John came riding up, heard the commotion from his place. "Between the 2 of us, we ran off 2 of them, but that last one was persistent. Would have had us too, if not for you." They reported the incident to the sheriff when they went to town the following week. The rustlers had moved on, the lawman told them, probably to greener pastures after realizing the ranchers in this area were willing to fight back. Life returned to normal, though Ashton insisted Olivia continue practicing with the rifle. "You have good instincts," he told her, "and I feel better knowing you can handle yourself if I am not here." Winter arrived in earnest in December, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch took on a stark beauty, the red earth dusted with white, the sky a pale blue that seemed to go on forever. They spent long evenings by the fire, Olivia reading or sewing, while Ashton worked on repairing tack or carving small wooden figures, a hobby he was surprisingly good at. He made her a small bird, perfectly detailed, and she kept it on the windowsill where she could see it every morning. Christmas was simple but joyful. They rode to town for a church service, and Mrs. Martinez invited them for dinner afterward along with several other families. Olivia felt the warmth of community for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, women welcoming her and including her in their conversations, men clapping Ashton on the back and joking with him. She was no longer the girl with the harelip who people avoided. She was Mrs. Edwards, the rancher's wife, and she was accepted. On Christmas night, back at the ranch, Ashton gave her a present he had ordered months ago, before she had even arrived. It was a beautiful shawl, woven in shades of blue and green, soft as a cloud. She wrapped it around her shoulders and knew she would treasure it forever. "I have something for you too," she said, suddenly shy. She had knitted him a scarf in the evenings when he was not looking, working by lamplight after he fell asleep. It was not fancy, but it was made with love, every stitch a tiny prayer of thanks for this man and this life. He wrapped it around his neck immediately, even though they were inside by the warm fire, and declared it the finest scarf ever made. They made love that night with particular tenderness, and afterward, as they lay tangled together, Ashton whispered against her hair, "I love you, Olivia. I know I have not said it before, but I do. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first night, when you held my hand in the hotel dining room." Spring came with a rush of green, wildflowers carpeting the hillsides, calves being born, the garden bursting back to life. Olivia discovered she was pregnant in April, the realization coming when her monthly courses failed to arrive for the second month in a row, and certain smells that had never bothered her before suddenly made her nauseous. She told Ashton one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. She had been nervous about how to bring it up, but in the end, she simply said, "I think we are going to have a baby." He went very still, and for a moment she worried about his reaction. Then he turned to her, and his face was transformed with joy so pure it took her breath away. "Truly, truly, I think perhaps in December around Christmas." He let out a whoop that startled the chickens and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down before she got dizzy. He set her down carefully, then knelt in front of her, placing his hands on her still flat belly. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." Olivia ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was happiness, she realized. This was what all those songs and poems were about, this feeling of completeness, of being exactly where and with whom you were meant to be. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia continued working on the ranch, though Ashton fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to rest more, to let him do the heavy work. She humored him when she could but refused to be treated like an invalid. By summer, her belly was round and prominent, and she felt the baby moving inside her, little flutters that grew into kicks and rolls. They spent long evenings discussing names, debating the merits of various options. For a boy, they liked Aaron and Adam. For a girl, their favorites were Olivia's mother's name, which was Catherine, or Ashton's mother's name, which was Margaret. In August, Ashton rode to town and returned with lumber and supplies. "I am building a cradle," he announced. "The baby needs somewhere proper to sleep." She watched him work on it in the evenings, measuring and cutting and sanding until the wood was smooth as silk. He carved small designs into the headboard, stars and moons, and a tiny bird like the one he had made for her. When it was finished, They placed it in the bedroom near their own bed, and Olivia would sometimes find Ashton just standing there, looking at it, a slight smile on his face. Their neighbor, John Fletcher, and his wife Mary came to visit in September, bringing supplies and offering help. Mary, who had 5 children of her own, gave Olivia advice and reassurance. "First babies are the scariest," Mary said as they sat together on the porch while the men talked cattle. "But women have been doing this forever. You will be fine. And when the time comes, you send for me. I will come help." Olivia squeezed her hand gratefully. Having another woman nearby, someone with experience, eased some of her anxiety about the approaching birth. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the cottonwoods turning gold again. Olivia was enormous now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet, moving slowly and carefully. Ashton barely let her do anything, taking over most of her chores despite her protests. "You are growing our child," he said firmly when she complained about being coddled. "That is enough work for anyone." November was quiet, a time of waiting. Olivia sewed tiny gowns and knitted soft blankets. Ashton made sure they had plenty of firewood stacked and food stored. He rode to town and arranged for the doctor to come if needed, though Mary Fletcher had assured them she had delivered many babies and would be there to help. The baby came early on a frigid morning in early December, 3 weeks before Christmas. Olivia woke before dawn with pains that she initially thought were just the backache she had been experiencing for days. But they grew stronger and more regular, and when her water broke, soaking the bed, she knew it was time. Ashton rode like mad to fetch Mary Fletcher, then rode on to town for the doctor, just in case. Mary arrived within an hour, calm and capable, taking charge immediately. She sent Ashton to boil water and gather clean linens, keeping him busy and out of the way. The labor was long and hard, lasting all through the day and into the evening. Olivia had never experienced pain like this, waves of agony that seemed endless. Mary coached her through it, wiping her face with cool cloths, encouraging her, telling her she was doing well. Ashton hovered in the doorway, looking pale and frightened, until Mary finally took pity on him and let him come hold Olivia's hand. "I am sorry," Olivia gasped between contractions. "I am sorry you have to see me like this." "Hush," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are the bravest person I have ever known. I am in awe of you." As the sun was setting, painting the sky in those familiar golds and reds, the baby finally came. The doctor arrived just in time to catch the infant, and the sound of a newborn's cry filled the little house. Olivia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, wrapping the baby in a blanket. "A fine, healthy boy." He placed the infant on Olivia's chest, and she looked down at her son in wonder. He was red-faced and angry, his little fists waving, his eyes scrunched shut. He had a shock of dark hair and Ashton's strong features. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Ashton was crying, tears streaming down his face unchecked. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, and the infant grabbed on with surprising strength. "Hello, Aaron," Ashton whispered, using the name they had chosen. "Welcome to the world, son." Aaron Edwards proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who kept his parents up many nights those first few weeks. Olivia was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. She would nurse him in the rocking chair Ashton had bought in town, watching him suckle, marveling at his tiny perfection. Ashton was a devoted father, walking the floor with Aaron when he was fussy, changing his diapers without complaint, singing to him in a surprisingly sweet voice. Christmas that year was even more special than the one before. They put up a small pine tree Ashton had cut and decorated it with strings of popcorn and the wooden ornaments he had carved. Aaron, just 3 weeks old, slept through most of it, oblivious to the celebration happening around him. "This time last year I was terrified," Olivia said as they sat together on Christmas evening, the baby asleep in the cradle nearby. "I was about to meet a stranger I had agreed to marry. I did not know if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the best decision." "And now?" Ashton asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Now I know it was the best decision. The best thing I ever did was get on that stagecoach and come to Los Alamos." He kissed her temple. "The best thing I ever did was place that advertisement and hope someone like you would answer." Winter passed with the usual challenges, cold winds and icy mornings. But with Aaron to care for and each other to hold, they barely noticed the hardships. Spring came again, bringing new life to the ranch. Aaron grew quickly, his dark hair filling in, his eyes turning the same striking blue-gray as his father's. He smiled early, reaching for his parents, babbling happily from his cradle or from the little nest of blankets Olivia made for him near wherever she was working. In May, when Aaron was 5 months old and Olivia had mostly recovered from the birth, they took a trip to town. It was Aaron's first real outing beyond the ranch, and Olivia was nervous, dressing him in his finest gown and wrapping him carefully in blankets despite the warm weather. The people of Los Alamos flocked around them in the street, everyone wanting to see the Edwards baby, exclaiming over how handsome he was, how alert. Mrs. Martinez held him and declared him perfect, blessing him in Spanish. Olivia stood there, her baby being passed from person to person, all these people who had welcomed her into their community now welcoming her son, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. One young woman, new to town, stared at Olivia's Harelip with poorly concealed shock. Olivia saw her and felt the old shame try to rise up. But then Ashton was there, sliding his arm around her waist, kissing her cheek right where everyone could see. "My beautiful wife," he said clearly, and there was no mistaking the love and pride in his voice. The young woman looked away, embarrassed, and Olivia relaxed into her husband's embrace. It did not matter what strangers thought. She knew who she was now. She was Olivia Edwards, rancher's wife, mother, beloved. The Harelip was part of her face, part of her story, but it did not define her anymore. Summer brought news from the Fletcher Ranch that Mary was pregnant again with their 6th child. The two women spent time together when they could, Aaron playing with the younger Fletcher children while Olivia and Mary talked and worked on their sewing. A real friendship developed between them, and Olivia treasured it. That fall, Ashton decided to expand the herd significantly, buying 50 more head of cattle from a rancher who was retiring. It meant more work, but also more income. They were prospering, their hard work paying off. Ashton began talking about adding on to the house, maybe building a proper parlor, a guest room for when his sister might visit from Missouri. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons, of births and growth and the endless cycle of ranch life. Aaron learned to walk on sturdy legs, chasing chickens and petting the horses with careful hands. Olivia taught him his letters, reading to him every night, just as she still read to Ashton. The boy was bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything he saw. When Aaron was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and while the birth in August was still difficult, it was faster than the first. They had a daughter, and they named her Catherine, after Olivia's mother. She was tiny and delicate, with Olivia's light brown hair and a rosebud mouth. Aaron was fascinated with his baby sister, wanting to hold her constantly, to show her his treasures, to tell her stories. The house Ashton had built those years ago expanded to accommodate the growing family. He added 2 more rooms, working in the evenings and on Sundays after church. The ranch continued to prosper, the herd growing, their reputation for quality cattle spreading throughout the territory. When Aaron was 7 and Catherine 4, they welcomed a 3rd child, another boy they named Andrew. He was the biggest of the babies, with a lusty cry and an appetite to match. The household was chaotic and wonderful, full of children's laughter and the constant activity of family life. Olivia sometimes thought back to that day when she had stepped off the stagecoach in Los Alamos, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. If someone had told her then that this would be her life, she would not have believed it. A husband who loved her fiercely, who still kissed her Harelip every single day and told her she was beautiful. Children healthy and happy, growing like weeds in the New Mexico sun. A home that was truly hers, on land that stretched out to the horizon. Friends and community and purpose. She had come west as a mail-order bride, expecting at best to be tolerated, at worst to be rejected and sent back in shame. Instead, she had found love in its truest form, acceptance that went soul deep, and a life richer than any she could have imagined. One evening in the summer when Aaron was 10, Catherine 7, and Andrew 3, the family sat on the expanded porch watching the sunset. It was their favorite time of day, the heat finally breaking, the sky putting on its nightly show. Aaron was reading to Andrew from a storybook, while Catherine helped her mother snap green beans from the garden. Ashton sat in his chair, whittling as he often did, creating small wooden toys for the children or decorative pieces for the house. "Papa, tell the story about when Mama came on the stagecoach," Catherine said. She loved this story and requested it often. Ashton glanced at Olivia, a smile playing at his lips. She nodded permission as she always did. "Well, it was a hot July day," Ashton began, his voice taking on the cadence of a practiced storyteller. "And I was waiting in town, nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. I had sent for a mail-order bride, you see, a woman I had never met but had been writing letters to. I did not know if she would actually come, or if she did, whether we would suit each other. But she came," Catherine said, already knowing how it went but wanting to hear it anyway. "She came. Stepped off that stagecoach wearing a gray dress and a little hat with a veil, and I thought my heart might pound right out of my chest. We talked, and I took her to the hotel to rest. The next day, I brought her out to the ranch, showed her around. And you know what I realized?" "What?" Andrew asked, even though Aaron was shushing him because he had heard this story many times. "I realized I had already fallen in love with her through her letters, and meeting her in person just confirmed it. She was brave and kind and smart, everything I had hoped for and more." "And then you got married," Catherine said happily. "And then we got married, and it was the best decision I ever made. Well, until you three came along. Then it became the second best decision, with having you all being the best." "Ashton Edwards, you are a shameless flatterer," Olivia said, but she was smiling. He set down his whittling and came to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand as he had that first night in the hotel dining room so many years ago. "I am a man telling the truth. You took a chance on a lonely rancher in the middle of nowhere. You trusted me when you had every reason to be cautious. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. How could I be anything but grateful?" He kissed her then, in front of the children who made exaggerated sounds of disgust but were secretly pleased to see their parents so affectionate. And as he always did, he kissed her Harelip tenderly, that small imperfection that had once been the source of so much pain but had become, over the years, just another part of the face he loved. The children grew as children do. Aaron became a skilled horseman and took over more and more of the ranch duties as he got older, showing a natural aptitude for cattle management. Catherine was the dreamer of the family, always with her nose in a book or making up elaborate stories. Andrew was the adventurer, constantly getting into mischief, exploring every corner of the ranch and beyond. When Aaron was 16, a tall young man who looked so much like his father it was startling. A letter arrived from Missouri. Ashton's sister, who they had been corresponding with for years, announced that she and her family were planning to visit that summer. Her husband's business had prospered, and they wanted to make the journey west to finally meet Ashton's family in person. The visit was a grand affair. Ashton's sister Margaret arrived with her husband and their 3 children, now teenagers themselves. The house was full to bursting, children everywhere, adults catching up on years of separation. Margaret embraced Olivia warmly, thanking her for making her brother so happy. "He writes about you constantly," Margaret said, "about how lucky he is, how you changed his life. I am so glad he found you." "I am the lucky one," Olivia replied, meaning it with her whole heart. The summer passed in a whirlwind of activity, the cousins getting to know each other, the adults reminiscing and making new memories. When Margaret's family finally departed in late August, there were tears and promises to visit again soon, to not let so many years pass before the next reunion. The years continued their steady march. Catherine, at 15, began corresponding with a young man from town, the son of the general store owner. Olivia watched her daughter fall in love and remembered her own courtship, conducted through letters across vast distances. When Catherine was 18, she married the young man, Thomas, in the little church in Los Alamos, and Olivia cried happy tears as she watched her daughter pledge her life to someone who looked at her the way Ashton had always looked at Olivia. Aaron met a girl at a church social when he was 19, a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county. Her name was Sarah, and she was practical and smart, with a laugh that could light up a room. The courtship was brief but intense, both young people knowing quickly that they had found something special. They married the following spring, and Ashton helped Aaron buy land adjacent to their ranch, setting his son up with his own herd to manage. Andrew, ever the wanderer, announced at 17 that he wanted to go to Denver for a year, to see something of the world beyond New Mexico before settling down. Olivia worried, but Ashton supported their youngest son's desire for adventure. "He will come back," Ashton said confidently. "This land gets in your blood. He just needs to see what else is out there to appreciate what we have here." And Ashton was right. Andrew returned a year later, having worked various jobs in Denver and seen the growing city. He came home with stories and experiences, but also with relief at being back on the ranch. "There is no place like it," he told his parents. "I am glad I went, but I am gladder to be home." The ranch had expanded significantly over the years, now encompassing over 1,000 acres and running more than 500 head of cattle. Ashton and Olivia hired help during the busiest seasons, but the core operation remained a family affair, with Aaron and Andrew working alongside their father, and Catherine and her husband Thomas often lending a hand during roundups and brandings. Grandchildren began arriving. Catherine had a son first, then twin girls. Aaron and Sarah had 2 boys in quick succession. The house that Ashton had built, now much expanded from its original 3 rooms, rang with the sounds of multiple generations. Olivia kept a garden that was legendary throughout the county, providing vegetables not just for her own large family but for neighbors and friends. She taught her grandchildren to read, just as she had taught her own children, gathering them around her on the porch in the evenings for stories. Ashton, now in his 50s, had silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still strong and capable, still running the ranch with the same dedication he had always shown. And every single day, without fail, he kissed Olivia and told her she was beautiful. "We are getting old," she said one evening as they sat in their favorite spot on the porch, the same place they had sat so many evenings before. They were alone, a rare occurrence, all the children and grandchildren off at their own homes or activities. "Speak for yourself," Ashton teased. "I am as young as I ever was." She laughed and swatted his arm. "You are a terrible liar." He grew more serious, reaching for her hand. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," she confirmed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever regret it?" Coming all this way for a man you had never met. It was a question he had never asked before, and she considered it carefully. Not for a single moment. Every hard day, every challenge, every fear, it was all worth it. You gave me a life, Ashton. You gave me love and family and purpose. You saw past what everyone else could not get past. Her hand went unconsciously to her lip, a gesture she rarely made anymore. He caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her palm. Then he leaned forward and kissed her harelip, as he had done thousands of times over the years. "This makes you you," he said, repeating the words he had spoken on their wedding night all those years ago. "I love it. I love you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." She kissed him back, tasting salt from the tears on her own cheeks, though she had not realized she was crying. "And I love you, Cowboy. My brave, wonderful cowboy who took a chance on a scared girl from Philadelphia." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in those familiar golds and reds that never got old, no matter how many times they saw them. The land stretched out before them, the land they had worked and loved and built a life on. In the distance, they could see cattle grazing peacefully. Closer to the house, the garden flourished in neat rows. The barn, expanded twice over the years, stood solid and reassuring. This was home. This was family. This was love in its truest, most enduring form. As the stars began to appear, one by one, scattered across the darkening sky, Ashton pulled Olivia close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saying yes. For coming all this way. For building this life with me." "Thank you for asking," she whispered back. "Thank you for seeing me." They sat like that until the sky was fully dark and the stars were thick overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful and lasting in the wild lands of New Mexico. The years continued to pass, as years do, but the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with time, like wine aging in a cellar. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated weddings and births, mourned the inevitable losses that came with living a long life. Through it all, they had each other, a partnership forged in trust and acceptance and genuine affection. When Olivia turned 50, Ashton threw her a party that brought together everyone they knew. Their children and grandchildren were there, of course, but also neighbors from miles around, friends from town, people whose lives they had touched over the decades. There was music and dancing, food in abundance, laughter and storytelling. At one point, Olivia stood on the porch of the house that had become so much more than the small 3-room structure Ashton had built, looking out at the crowd of people, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about that frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach 24 years ago, certain she was making a terrible mistake, convinced no one could truly accept her. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, the joy and love and belonging, would that girl have believed it? Probably not. Some things you had to live to understand. Ashton found her there, weaving through the crowd to stand beside her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far we have come. About how blessed we are." "We are blessed," he agreed. "Every single day, I wake up grateful." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. Together, they watched the party, watched their family and friends celebrating, and knew they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. The ranch would pass to Aaron eventually, but all 3 children would benefit from their parents' hard work. The land would stay in the family, the Edwards name would continue, and the story of how it all began would be told and retold to future generations. It was a story of courage and chance, of letters exchanged across vast distances, of a man looking for a partner and a woman looking for a place to belong. It was a story of acceptance that went deeper than surface imperfections, of love that saw the person beneath the scars. It was a story of building a life together in a hard land, of raising children and weathering storms and finding joy in simple things, sunsets and starry nights, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, and the touch of a familiar hand. It was, in short, a story of the American West in all its harsh beauty and boundless possibility, where people could remake themselves, where the past did not matter as much as what you were willing to work for in the present. As the sun set that evening on Olivia's 50th birthday party, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Ashton pulled her into a dance. Someone was playing a fiddle, a sweet, simple melody, and they swayed together in the fading light while their family and friends clapped and cheered. "Here is to 50 more years," Ashton said, though they both knew that was not realistic. "Here is to every year, every day, every moment we have left," Olivia countered. "However many that may be, as long as we are together." "As long as we are together," he echoed, and kissed her. Right there in front of everyone. Kissed her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding night all those years ago. The party continued long into the night, but eventually, people began to leave, heading home under a sky brilliant with stars. The children and grandchildren cleaned up, sending Ashton and Olivia off to bed with hugs and kisses and well wishes. Alone in their bedroom, the same room they had shared since their wedding night, Olivia undressed slowly, her body showing the marks of age and childbearing but still strong and capable. Ashton watched her with eyes that still held desire and admiration. "Do you remember our wedding night?" he asked as they lay down together. "Every detail," she said. "I was so nervous." "So was I. I wanted everything to be perfect for you." "It was perfect. You were perfect." She touched his face, tracing the lines that time had carved there. "You still are." He caught her hand and kissed it, then pulled her close. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other as they had been for 24 years, two hearts beating in sync, two lives so thoroughly intertwined they could not imagine being separate. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Another year passed, then another. Aaron's children grew and began to talk about their own futures. Catherine's twins were courting young men from town. Andrew, who had returned from Denver with wanderlust out of his system, met a schoolteacher from Santa Fe and began a serious courtship. Life on the ranch went on, the work never ending but satisfying. Ashton gradually let Aaron take over more of the day-to-day operations, though he still rode out most days to check on things and lend a hand where needed. Olivia scaled back her garden somewhat, but still produced enough vegetables to feed a small army. She took up quilting in earnest, creating beautiful patterns that became treasured heirlooms. When they had been married 30 years, the family gathered again for a celebration. By now, there were 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. The house could not hold everyone, so they set up tables outside, under the cottonwood trees that had grown tall and stately over the decades. There were speeches and toasts. Aaron, now a successful rancher in his own right, spoke about the example his parents had set, about the love and partnership they modeled. Catherine talked about growing up in a house full of laughter and affection, about never doubting she was loved. Andrew, the baby of the family, made everyone laugh with stories of his parents' adventures and misadventures. When it was Olivia's turn to speak, she stood and looked out at the sea of faces, family stretching out before her in multiple generations. Her voice was steady and strong. 30 years ago, I took the biggest risk of my life. I got on a train and then a stagecoach and traveled halfway across the country to marry a man I had never met. I was terrified. I was certain I was making a mistake. But I did it anyway because something in his letters spoke to my heart, made me hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a place in this world where I could belong. I found so much more than that. I found a partner who sees me, truly sees me, every day. I found a home in this land that I could never have imagined loving as much as I do. I found purpose and joy and a family that is the greatest blessing of my life. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Every moment has led to this, to all of you, and I am grateful beyond words." She sat down to thunderous applause and more than a few tears. Ashton took her hand and squeezed it, his own eyes suspiciously bright. The party lasted well into the evening, and when everyone had finally left and the house was quiet again, Ashton and Olivia walked out to their favorite spot on the porch. The sun was setting, as it had so many times before, and they stood together watching the daily miracle of colors flooding the sky. 30 years, Ashton said softly. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean. Olivia leaned into him, fitting perfectly under his arm as she always had. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you, nor I without you. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his weathered hands. You are my greatest adventure, Olivia Edwards. You are my home and my heart. You are everything. She stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring into it 30 years of love and gratitude and devotion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. Come, Ashton said. Let us watch the sunset one more time. They settled into their chairs, holding hands as they always did, and watched the sky blaze with color. The land stretched out before them, bathed in golden light, beautiful and harsh and enduring. Cattle grazed in the distance. Birds called their evening songs. Somewhere, a coyote howled, that wild sound that was the voice of the desert itself. This was their life, built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. This was their legacy, the ranch and the family and the story that would be told for generations. It had started with a mail-order bride and a cowboy willing to look past surface imperfections to see the person beneath. It had started with letters and courage and a leap of faith. And it had become this, a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of acceptance and genuine connection, a reminder that sometimes the greatest risks yield the greatest rewards. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Ashton leaned over and kissed Olivia's Harelip tenderly, as he had done every day for 30 years and would continue to do for however many years they had left. This makes you you, he whispered as he always did. I love it. And I love you, she whispered back as she always did. They sat together under the emerging stars, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that was more beautiful than either could have imagined. The Wild West that had brought them together continued to spin out its dramas and tragedies around them. But here, on this porch, in this moment, there was only peace and love and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived together. The story that had begun on a hot July day in 1876, when a frightened young woman stepped off a stagecoach and into an uncertain future, had become something extraordinary. It was a story that would be told and retold, passed down through generations, inspiring others to take chances on love, to see beyond the surface, to build something lasting. And on this night, 30 years after that fateful beginning, Ashton and Olivia Edwards sat together under the New Mexico stars, holding hands, watching the sky, knowing that whatever time they had left together would be cherished, that their love had been proven through decades of partnership and affection, and that they were, both of them, exactly where they were meant to be. The ranch would endure. The family would grow. The land would continue its eternal cycles. But the foundation of it all, the bedrock upon which everything else was built, was the love between a cowboy and his mail-order bride. A love that saw past imperfections to the beauty beneath. A love that had transformed two lonely people into a family, a legacy, a legend. And that love would endure long after the last sunset faded, long after the last star dimmed, echoing down through time as a reminder that true acceptance, genuine love, and courage to risk everything for connection are the things that make us most human, most alive, most truly ourselves.